Hello, hello, David. Welcome to the Mentally Badass podcast. I'm so happy to have you today.
Hi, Justine. It's great to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to talk to you today because we're going to get really deep, like we always do on this podcast. We're going to be talking about your depression, your time working as an election official. I've actually never had someone on the podcast that has worked there, and so I'm excited to know the truth. So let's first, I want to dive into you yourself as a person. You're very open about your depression. And from what I saw on Amazon, from what I was reading, like the summary and the reviews, is that you really do get really deep, talking and being very authentic. So let's dive into your depression. When were you diagnosed with your depression?
Well, I think I was first diagnosed a long, long time ago when I was in college. I actually was hospitalized for a couple of weeks with depression. So it's been a lifelong struggle. It's really the past 10 years I've really, really struggled with depression. And that's kind of why I wrote my book. It was really to share, hopefully, to share something that people could relate to and try to get around. I think there's still a lot of stigma related to mental illness, and I think that's too bad because I think from what I've seen in being hospitalized by the various treatments I've tried, a lot of people are out there struggling, and I think we have to get around the stigma of mental health, that it is something many of us are suffering from.
Yeah, when you were hospitalized, if you don't mind me asking, was it because of like a suicide attempt?
It was not because of a suicide attempt. It was because I was going through traditional talk therapy and medication, and nothing was working. So my therapist at the time thought a more thorough evaluation of what I was actually suffering from would be helpful. I don't think it actually was helpful. It was kind of a nightmarish experience. But yeah, it was something I was willing to try because at that point I was so desperate to feel just a little bit better.
Yeah, I've actually heard that going into like the hospital, it's been like a bad experience for some people. I've even heard that it's like more traumatizing. Can we talk like just a little bit more about your experience? Like what made it a bad experience?
It just felt like I was being treated like a number. It really felt like they weren't listening to me as an individual. One of the reasons I'm a writer, and at
Mhm.
that point, it was the first time I really suffered from writer's block, where I was having a really hard time writing, which felt like part of me was completely cut off. It was like I had an amputation. And it was really hard for them to understand the importance of writing in my life. And so, again, it felt like I was just being treated like any other person in the hospital. It didn't feel like an individualized treatment. I don't know if you're a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but there's an episode where Buffy is hospitalized, and it's a very nightmarish episode. And that's kind of what I felt like.
Yeah, I definitely got to see that. It makes me so sad just hearing that you're treated like a number because with mental health, the last thing you want to be treated like is a number because first of all, everyone's mental health is when it comes to depression is different. We all come from different backgrounds. We're all depressed for different reasons. But just like I feel like that's something that needs to be, more funded when it comes to like taking care of people who are struggling with their mental health because it was what's the point of, going to a mental hospital if it's just gonna make you worse, right?
Absolutely. I absolutely totally agree with that. I think we have to shift the paradigm in how we treat people with depression because I think it is a lot of it is just so standard and we
Hmm.
trying to fit people into the same box. And I think is as you mentioned, all of us are different. All of us have different backgrounds. All of us are going through different things. I think we really need to find some way to individualize the treatment we're all getting.
Yeah, 100%. Like for me, like I personally struggle with depression, bipolar, ADHD, BPD. I like to say like I have all it feels like I have all the letters in the alphabet. I've never personally have been in a hospital, but I have my fair share of not having the best experience with the mental health industry. I've literally had like therapists not even show up to our sessions.
Wow.
Yeah, I can literally like since we're talking about like your experience in the hospital, like I would definitely want to like talk about my negative experience in the mental health industry. But yeah, no, I've had some pretty bad experiences that literally put me into a mental breakdown. That you're right, that it's not they didn't treat me like a person. They I feel like it didn't really care. Like there was times where I had to like there was one therapist that she was great like the first one or two sessions and then there was so many times where I was because at the time we were in the pandemic, so it was online. And I'm like sitting, I'm like, am I doing this right? Like, am I not in the right? You know, because it's like the first time doing virtual weight room. Like, am I doing this wrong? And so it's like 15 minutes in. I'm like, okay, let me call the office. And they're like, yeah, she's sick today. And I was like, okay, well, why didn't anyone tell me? She's like, oh, sorry about that. And I was like, first I was like, okay, maybe it was just a fluke or whatever. You know, so obviously stuff happens, right? Happened again. And I was like, and in my head, I was like, what if I'm on the edge? You know, it's like, what if I'm at the
Yep.
point where it's like, if I want to jump off a bridge and I took, had the courage to reach out for help? Because, like, I mean, for me, the situation that I was in at the time, luckily I wasn't at like the edge. Cause I mean, I've been there, but I wasn't at the time. But what if I was? What if this was like my first time reaching out for therapy and this is how I'm treated? That
I
would make
to- I totally hear you. I mean, in the past 10 years, I've seen four different therapists, and the
Huh.
first three quit on me. I mean, they were the ones that
No
left
way.
me. And it just, when you have to start over, it's difficult. But to have somebody that you've shared your deepest thoughts and feelings with just completely quit, it makes it, I mean, it doesn't seem right. To your point, if I had been on the edge, that would have
Broke
put me,
you.
yeah, totally put me over the edge.
Yeah, wait. So if you don't mind me asking, why did they quit? Like
I never really got
they
they
just like, oh, I gotta go. Like
Yep. They recommended the next person, but they just left the.
that's so crazy. I kind of wonder people's intentions when they go into therapy. And it's kind of like also the same thing for being like a nurse or a doctor. You know how it's like a whole, oh, your parents will be proud of you if you become like a doctor or a nurse or have a degree like a psychiatrist. And so it makes you wonder like what's like, are they there for the money or are they there for the people? Because if you're in that field, you need to be there for the people. And it's just really really sad how like the world is when it comes to that. I even had like bad experience with medication. I had a psychiatrist that would refuse to take me off medication when I requested it. Yes.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, isn't this my legal right to not like to choose to go off like I mean safely of course. Like I wasn't going to go cold turkey. I go to my psychiatrist cuz I'm on like an antipsychotic and at the time I was on antipsychotic and I was like at the highest dosage, right? And I was just having like a bunch of like side effects and at that time where I currently was at I was thinking about like medical marijuana because that apparently helps with like anxiety and depression. And so I was thinking about pursuing that, right? But I can't do both, at least to my knowledge. I don't know, be a little, I don't want too much going on, you know what I mean? So I explained that to him and I said, I want to be interested in looking into more holistic routes. And he was like, no, I'm not taking you off. And I literally was like, wait, what? Are you saying no? And I'm like, wait, isn't this like my legal right? Like, I don't like, do I like, it was so confusing to me. And I just kept explaining to him, and he kept saying no. Like, he would refuse. And I said, well, if you're not going to help me, eventually I don't want to go cold turkey. Like, if I go cold turkey, I'm on like 300, like Lamotrigine. Like, I can go into a seizure. You know, like if you're not going to help me, like how would you feel if your patient like that happened to them? And he was just giving me like a straight face. Like he was not like, he was acting very like, he just wasn't listening to me.
See,
And so he wasn't. And I was just like, I was so flabbergasted by it. I'm just like, what is going on right now? And and then of course, with that happening, he's making me very angry, right? Very angry, which makes me look like I'm going crazy on him, right? Which gives him more of a reason. Oh yeah, no, she has to be on here. I'm like, you're literally like you're literally instigating me. You're literally provoking me. So anyway, I was getting really mad and I just slammed shut my laptop.
wow.
I did. And I was just like, I can't. I didn't even, I've never ever done that before. It was just blew my mind. I'm like, I'm literally being forced to be like, it just didn't feel human, you know? So right after that, I think I called the office right away and I said, listen, I need another psychiatrist like right away, like emergency, like this is what happened. They're like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. We'll get you with this person for tomorrow. And luckily they got me in with someone really fast. And I told the girl this, and she was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, this person." I'm like, I was trying to figure out the legalities of it. I mean, I can understand if I'd done something where I was like hurting others or like hurting myself, and it's like for my safety. But I didn't do anything wrong. Like I've been stable, like nothing. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm an adult. I should make my own decisions. And also, like, I'm paying you too. Like, I'm an adult paying you. Like, what? Why are you controlling me like that? So anyway, she did what I asked for, and she weeded me off it, safely, of course. And then I noticed, like, about a year later, I noticed like my old documents from him, and I was reading through it, and he put me in for that session that I was manic.
Wow.
I literally read this, and I was like, okay, because at first, like I said, it was like 1 to 2 years later, so it doesn't matter anymore. But I was like, this is questionable.
So I think this gets back to what we talked about earlier. I think medication I've had um, I have yet to take a medication other than my anti-anxiety medication that's actually helped me in any way.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it gets back to what we were talking about before. With medication, it seems like they just prescribe things. They don't take your individual, what makes you an individual, and consider that and what they're prescribing. And that, what you just talked about, sounds just horrendous. I mean, you want to take care of yourself in the way that you think is best. To have a psychiatrist not listen to that, I mean, it's just like we were saying, it just makes things worse. If you're on the edge, it's going to push you over the edge.
Yeah, it felt like, you know what they say, they're listening to respond, not listening to like understand.
Yep,
That's
I
what it
think that.
felt. That's
Yep,
exactly how it felt. Like I was talking, he was just like he wasn't even listening. I was like, I can't even imagine. Like in my head, I'm just like, obviously, I know you guys get kickbacks on this medication. Were you struggling financially? That you just needed my medication?
unfortunately, I think that happens way too often to people. You're right; they're not listening to respond to you.
It's really sad. And to be honest, I mean, right now I am currently on medication, and I'm on like the right amount. Like I'm not extremely like experiencing like as like many headaches and such. Well, I mean, I have headaches, but for different reasons. But and I'm sure my psychiatrist doesn't listen to my podcast, but she like requires me to see her like every single month. While I used to be able to do like a 90 days. Like once you're like stable, everything's good, you've been at long term, they can do like, okay, I'll see you in 3 months. Yeah, I have to see her every month. And
Wow.
I don't like it. It's like thankfully my insurance covers it in full because otherwise that'd be a lot of money. But I even though it's just quickly like on Teledoc for like 20-15 minutes, it's just I don't know. I just feel like it's just not productive because it's just the same thing. Like I feel like there's only so much that can happen in a month. Like I feel like if there was something actually wrong with medication, like I'll send a message to get on a call. But like I feel like why can't we do the 3 months thing? It's cheaper with my like, to get the medication in 90 days. And it's like not saying that I don't like her. It's just like we don't have to see each other every single month. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally, it's frustrating. Yes.
Yeah, but then again, it's like, what am I gonna do, right? Like, I can't even complain too. My insurance is covering it in full, and I don't want to switch and go through a whole thing all over again, right? So I just deal with the whole 15 minutes a month. Okay, yep, doing great. Yep, nothing wrong. Yep, I don't want to jump off a bridge. Like that's literally how I respond to her. It's like, oh, so how are the meds going? I'm like, great. I don't want to die. That's literally how I respond. She's like, oh, okay. Like she looked like she was kind of scared of me, and I was like, I don't know what to say to you. Like I say it with just a straight face too. I just you gotta like laugh about it here and there, right?
Yes, definitely.
I want to talk about your experience working as election official. Can you tell me about? I know nothing about how it is, so I don't even know how to ask the question. So just like kind of give me a background, like what did you do? How was it?
So I had a 25-year career administering elections. I did it at several different levels, and every state is different. But in Minnesota, the main election duties actually fall at the county level. And so I worked for the largest county in the state as the election supervisor. And that meant getting people registered to vote. It meant getting the ballots prepared. It meant securing polling places and the poll workers that work at polling places. And so I did that for a number of years. And then in 2019, I was appointed as the director of elections for the state of Minnesota. So I worked for the Secretary of State, and that was more high level. We were the ones that actually housed the voter registration system in the state. So all 87 counties could access the same database to register voters. We were charged with training our 87 counties on running elections, getting information out to voters and candidates. It was a very rewarding career because obviously elections play a very fundamental part of our government. And so it felt like we were doing very important work. So it really was a rewarding career. Although after the 2020 election, things really got crazy with the attacks against election officials and skepticism about running fair and secure elections. It really became more about fighting misinformation and disinformation about how elections actually work, and so that was frustrating. But again, I think people don't like yourself don't understand that when you show up at the polling place on election day, there's been a whole lot of work put in already to
Hmm.
make sure things run smoothly on election day. Somebody that I worked with once compared it to a wedding. You do all this planning for one specific day, but there's many pieces that you have to put together to make sure things run smoothly and go well on your wedding day. That's
Hmm.
kind of like the same with elections. There's work that we put in year round to make sure that voting happens and that it happens in a fair and secure way, and that the voting experience for our voters is is smooth and we don't run into issues.
So I have a couple of questions of just about your experience that I've seen like that goes around social media and the internet, especially just I mean, obviously you know how our country is right now, what's going on, but um, I have a question where there was this video that I saw, and people were saying that illegal immigrants were voting. Is that true?
No. So,
Yeah.
I mean, every election, there are allegations of ineligible people voting, whether it be an undocumented person or a felon.
Hmm.
But there's never been any evidence that that happens on any widespread manner. In
Hmm.
undocumented people, especially, the last thing you would want to do is to have government have the ability to track you. Because if you show up at a
Yeah,
polling
true.
place, you have to give your um, identity and prove your identity and where you live. And so, for somebody undocumented to go into a polling place to cast a single vote and give up their anonymity like that, I, I, it doesn't make sense to me. So no, there's been no documented evidence that there's any amount of undocumented people voting.
Yeah, because people were. Could I said there was a post, and um, I don't know if I remember the name. His name is Charlie. I don't know if it's Stirk or whatever. He pretty much he goes to college campuses and he debates college students. And I watch his stuff just for entertainment purposes. And there was this like the student actually stumped him pretty much, which is really rare. But Charlie would kind of the way he was responding back made it seem like illegal immigrants were voting. And so I comment, and obviously I know he wasn't going to read. I just comment just to comment, and I said, "Well, illegal immigrants they don't vote." And then people commented and said, "Oh, well, some places don't even check your ID." I'm like, "Is that a thing?"
So some states, Minnesota included, we don't require people to show ID when they vote, but when
Really?
they register to vote, we check the voter registration information against our state driver's license database and the social security database. So
Mm-hmm.
there's back end checks. We don't require somebody to show ID at the polling place, but they've already been checked beforehand.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm so glad you cleared that up because I was thinking like, that's a little concerning, but then when I saw when you reached out to me, I was like, "Oh, this is perfect timing. I'll ask him." Because you're from the source, so you know the answer versus like people like the public, they just see and they're just there like, "Oh, they don't check ID." And of course in their head, they would think that anyone could just vote. But yeah, if you're saying that it's already done beforehand, that totally makes sense. Here in Florida, they check.
Yeah.
And I believe did they vote in New Jersey? 'Cause I guess I don't
I
remember
think
if I voted. No, I
the,
didn't. I was not. I was the first time I voted was in Florida because of my age. So yeah.
the vast majority of states, I believe, requires you to show ID when you vote. But to me, if you're using it as a measure against voter fraud, the only thing you're checking is the person's identity, and
Hmm.
so I'm not sure it gets to the voter fraud issue because
Yeah, I want to talk about that. There's so much conversation on that.
think of, not to disparage college students, but think of all the young people that have fake IDs to get into bars. If you really want to commit voter fraud, you're going to be able to commit voter fraud because you can get a fake ID.
Well, don't they scan?
In some states, I don't think
Really?
it's not universal. No.
Oh wow. I so when I was 19, I was one of those college students, but I literally only used it for like my trip to Miami. That was really it. I swear. Like that was just I was just a 19-year-old, and yeah. I was just a 19-year-old going to Miami. So I got some like fake ID from like New York, and I'm from like apparently from Queens. And but if they scanned it, it wouldn't work. So one time I did go to we were club hopping, and I went to a club and they scanned it, and they were like, "Why isn't this working?" And I was like, "Oh, maybe it's your scanner." And he believed me. He was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry about that." And I was like, "It's okay. We're fine. Well, have a good night. Like, don't worry about it." Which saved my butt. Like, oh, last thing I need is call my be in jail in Miami and call my parents like, jail. Can you bail me out? Like, that's what I thought was gonna happen. But yeah, but that's I didn't even think about that. Yeah, college students. But then again, who would get a fake ID just to vote? Then again, who knows? Everyone's different. What about like in I guess it was 2020 actually when people were actually 2020 and this election as well where they were like messing with the mail-in ones. Like I think this previous election they were putting on fire in the box. I heard.
Yeah, that was one of the things we were really worried about in 2024. There was so many questions in 2020 about mail ballots. And obviously, with the pandemic, our state and many states are really encouraging people to vote by mail
Hmm.
because obviously with COVID, we didn't want somebody having to make the choice of putting their life on the line or voting. And so
Yeah.
in 2020, all the skepticism on mail ballots, we were really concerned about things like you're talking about, like people would blow up mailboxes. I don't think it happened on a I didn't hear it happening on a wide scale basis. Again, to talk about mail in ballots, there are a lot of processes behind the scenes that we're doing to make sure that it's a legitimate ballot that's being cast.
Hmm.
The person has to apply for the ballot in our state, and then there's a comparison done with the application against the information that's provided on the envelope that the ballot is returned. And like we require that they provide a driver's license number or the last four of their social security number on both documents, and then it gets compared before the ballot can be accepted. So again, like everything in elections, there are a lot of little things behind the scene that make sure that the person casting the vote is a legitimate voter and that the ballot is the one that they actually cast.
You know what's really interesting? Today, actually, before we got on, I got a letter in the mail from Bergen County, New Jersey, from the superintendent, like voting election and such, asking me if I still lived in New Jersey. And I thought, since I voted twice in Florida, I'm registered in Florida. I've been a resident since 20, I've been legally a resident since 2018 because the first couple of months I was on an internship here, but I switched my license over in 2018. So I know this is kind of random, but like, why would I still get something in the mail asking if I still live in Jersey?
So unless you actively contacted the New Jersey that let them know that you moved to Florida, they're not going to necessarily inactivate your voter registration.
Really?
One of the very unfortunate things that happened after the 2020 election, there's this consortium that's known as the Electronic Registration Information Center, or ERIC, that 33 states in 2020 belong to, that allowed us to share voter registration information with other states. So when somebody moved from Minnesota to Wisconsin, both states would be notified, and Minnesota would inactivate the voter registration, and Wisconsin would make sure to get the person registered. Unfortunately, one of the misinformation, disinformation campaigns was that somehow ERIC was this nefarious organization that was using the information to register Democrats, which was absolutely untrue. 33 states included red states, it included blue states. But because of this misinformation, disinformation, several of the red states dropped out of ERIC, which really weakened the national voter registration efforts because we no longer could share information of those states that dropped out.
Hmm.
It was really one of the things that happened after the 2020 election that was really unfortunate because Eric really strengthened voter registration nationwide and making sure that states' voter registration systems were kept up to date. Unfortunately, Florida was one of the states that dropped out.
Interesting. You know, the way that people, the public, how they think about elections, they think that it's rigged, it's not safe, people are getting paid off. Like, what would you have to say to people who are saying things like that?
Show me the proof. Show me the evidence. I mean, if any allegation of voter fraud or anything that would break the law in Minnesota, we have to report to the county attorneys are the ones in our state that investigate allegations of voter fraud. But you have to have proof.
Yeah.
Show me the evidence that this is actually happening, and then the county attorney will prosecute the person.
Yeah. I think people questions people like ethics and morals. I guess it's more like kind of like a conspiracy theory in a way. I
Yes,
guess. Yeah, people just assume things if they don't like get what they want. Oh, it's rigged, or there's voter fraud, or and it just creates chaos in our country. So you left that job, right?
at the end of last year, I retired.
Oh, okay. So did you leave because of retirement, or like was it bad for your mental health? Like, what was the actual reasoning?
It was definitely the stress was really taking a toll on my health, so that's why I left the job. It really was mental health related.
Yeah, how did you cope considering you said you have your depression for a very long time? Like for me, I used to work at Disney, and obviously it's not the same kind of stress that you went through, but it was more of it was pretty high stress because of the standards that the company needs to uphold, and just every single day being yelled at on the phone like back to back to back. And it's just someone who has depression, bipolar, anxiety, it's not the ideal environment. Eventually I did leave it because of my mental health. So how did you cope? Because for me, I had to go on FMLA. Otherwise, I would have been like fired because I was kept sleeping till 6 p.m. I couldn't get to work. It was just really bad, my depression. So how was your experience? Like how did you cope? How did you do when you were working there?
Well, up until 2024, my job really helped with my mental health, even though it was
Really?
highly stressful. It was highly, like I mentioned before, I found it highly rewarding work that gave my life some purpose,
Really?
doing something really important. In 2024, just like you, I had to take a medical leave because it just got to be so overwhelming. The attacks against the profession just kept increasing, and people's skepticism about the integrity of our elections. I had put 25 years into making sure our elections had security and were fair, and to have people just attack the profession based on
Yeah.
complete misinformation, disinformation was really disheartening, and that's why I took my medical leave. But up until last year, it was I found, and especially over the tenure of being the state election director, I really found it rewarding mentoring the new generation of people entering the profession. That
Mhm.
really gave my life some purpose on being a mentor to the younger generation entering the profession.
That's I like your outlook on that when you're saying it was giving you purpose. And it's so sad that after 2020, it just kind of, I guess, in a way, was like I always say like Disney kind of destroyed my soul. Um, I mean, you know what's crazy too is that Disney saved me in the beginning because I was able to leave New Jersey, which my mental health was absolute trash there, just completely different environment. And then I was in the Disney bubble, which there was really nothing wrong with the company. It was more of just a guest that visited that, rudeness, entitlement. Like I've been stuff that I've been told and how abused I've been by guests. Like even my old not my old man, she's still my friend. She still works at Disney and attractions, and people have been physical with her, like
Yeah,
pushed her
that's
into a wall, and it's so crazy. I don't know how she's still there, to be honest with you.
and I think it's gotten worse since 2020. The pandemic, I think, really unleashed something.
People are just so angry all the time.
Yep.
I like don't like to leave my apartment. I like I work from home. Like I literally don't even have to. If I truly did not want to leave my apartment, I don't have to. I can just literally do food delivery. I can do grocery delivery, but naturally need to go out and get some sun. But it's just I feel like when I go out, like it's not even just going into like a grocery store. It's just like on the road. Everyone beeping at you, cutting you off. Like in Florida, it's really bad. Like they always say, like, oh, the Florida drivers are the worst. When they say that, they're not wrong. They're not. Like if you go on I-4, which is like one of the main highways that goes through, like I live in Orlando area, so it goes through there. They always say I-4 is die for
Wow.
because there's so many accidents. It's one of like that has the most accidents in the US. So when I tell people I go on that, like for when I used to work at Disney, I always have to use that highway to get to the office. They were like, "Oh, how are you still alive?" And I was like, "I don't know," because it's like I think it's just certain parts of I-4 that's like deadly, but it's just
I'm a big sports fan, so I have season tickets to Twins baseball here in Minnesota and Timberwolves basketball, and I take the light rail to the games. And it's been noticeable since the pandemic how much more angry people are. I mean, they're just
yeah.
completely confrontational on the train over little things. It's unnerving.
It's like what can we do to get back to like pre-pandemic? I mean, I know there's obviously people who were angry and struggling. It's just definitely more noticeable.
Yes.
What I think is that we've been progressing a lot with technology, right? And social media has completely evolved. I do social media management. I for like some companies, and I have my own brand. Obviously, but mentally a badass, duh. So I'm always like, social media is my job, right? And so I know like the ins and outs of what's going on online, and it's just like so toxic, like everywhere. I've been doing social media since 2016, and it's just gotten so much worse since the pandemic. It's like everyone's just like at each other. Like I see people getting mad over like bread.
Yep.
Like I would see a nice video of a lady who's just making bread, like a nice bread and some homemade snacks for her kid, and I enjoy it because it's just therapeutic just to watch. Oh, this is so nice. And I look at the comments, and it's like, well, there's some people who don't have that kind of privilege to stay home and to make homemade breads. This is very unrealistic, and I'm just like, this girl is just trying to live her life, and everyone's just like literally losing it. It's like she's not like shaming people who can't do it. She's just showing like not it's not like you have to make bread every single day. Like, but if you have like a Saturday open or a Sunday, you know what I mean? But people
I
I
don't
think
think I think social media is not helping with this anger issue. I think one of the reasons I wrote my book was to show my authentic self, and I don't think most people show their authentic selves on social media. They try to show their best self, and it just adds to this inauthentic ability to not be our real selves.
yes, yes, 100%. And you and we literally match in that way where people need to be more authentic on social media because you're giving this false persona of how like your life really is. I personally know people who their life is horrible behind the scenes. And then they post like all these family photos. Oh, we're such a happy family, perfect family, in these like photo shoots. And every time I see those, I'm sure there's probably people who maybe are really actually happy, but I see that as soon as I see the photo shoot types of families, perfect family, I'm like, oh, so who's
Yep.
yelling at who's abusing?
Yep.
Is because they try so hard. And like even the friend of mine, she's she's one of them. Like not the photo studio, but I know what goes on and how her husband abuses her, and then like a week later it would have like a whole family photo at her son's birthday, and it's like smiles, and it's so sad. And it just I feel for her, but also it's like I just wish people just didn't, like, if you're upset with your life, we're not saying that you have to go online and tell everybody that you're sad, but just like don't be fake about it.
Yep.
Like don't
Agree.
make it
Totally
seem
agree.
like you are. And also there's a bunch of course, influencers that look like they're rich, and yet their credit card statements like probably like $50,000 in debt. They even in LA, they even have places like a fake jet background where they can literally go to it and pretend they're on a jet. And just the way you take the photo, it can make it look like it. Like if I truly wanted to, I can go to Epcot and go to France and take a bunch of photos and at certain angles and editing and tell everybody I went to France.
Yep. And now with AI, it's
Oh my
making it even
god.
worse. Yeah.
Oh yeah, with AI too. It's just it's insane. So I know you want to talk about your cats. So I want to ask, so why do you want to talk about your cats? Like I know cats are great. I'm allergic unfortunately, which is kind of sad. But tell me about it. I know they're great for your mental health, but tell me the importance of cats.
So growing up, my sisters were like you, allergic to cats, so we could not have pets, both dogs and cats. And so when I graduated college and moved out on my own, I decided I wanted to get a cat. And at that point, I was really depressed. And the cat's name was Max, and Max was a great cat. He was a drooling kitty. He used to, when he purred, drool, and he had a very unique personality. But he really saved my life. I mean, taking care of Max really gave my life purpose at that point. And it
Mm-hmm.
was great to come home and he'd greet me at the door. We had a routine when he knew exactly when his meals were going to be he was going to be fed his meals. And so really for the first time in my life it was like living with another soul that I was responsible for but was highly independent as well. And
Mm-hmm.
so Max and I had a long relationship. He died in 2003, so we lived together for like 15 years. And when Max died, it was so devastating because I had never experienced the loss of a pet before. And I
Yeah.
thought, I can't deal with this again, so I'm never going to get another cat. And
Mm-hmm.
then I actually went on a blind date with somebody, and she scolded me and said, "You're being really selfish. You gave Max a great home for 15 years. There's so many cats in need of good homes. You're being selfish by not taking in other cats." And that kind of made sense to me. So what I did
Really?
was I decided I would get two cats, so when one of them died, then I would have the other one around to console me still. I the two cats I adopted, one was named Diego, one was named Thompson. Thompson was a three-legged cat. He had lost one of his legs in a trap. He was found in a park in an animal trap. And so he was a three-legged cat, but he was the greatest cat ever. But Thompson and Diego really got along well together. They spent almost all their time together. They'd nap together. And so it occurred to me that when one of them died, the other one would be as devastated as me that we had lost our partner. And so that's when I decided to get a third cat. His name was Theo. Theo was a very sweet cat. But that then I decided this is how we end up with people with 40 cats in their houses because they keep wanting to give more cats homes. And so I cut it off at three. So the three of us, Theo, Diego, and Thompson, I spent about, again, another 15 years together. Thompson died in 2018. Diego died during the pandemic, and then Theo passed away in 2022. And so I now have adopted three new cats, Elias, Norma, and Kenta. But again, to answer your question, I think cats are such, when they're sitting on your lap purring, you can't be anything but happy. It's just such
Yeah.
a shared experience that is so pleasant and so calming. It's great to have others in my. I live by myself, and so it's great to have others in the house that I talk to my cats constantly, like they're human beings. But it's just great to have others in the house that I really care a lot.
Yeah, I feel like I can never live alone. If I was living alone, I probably would do what you're doing, except I'll get a dog because I can't have a cat. But I really wish I could. Like I don't know if I said this or I have like amnesia or something, but my boyfriend wish we can have a cat. He actually today we talked about it. He was like, I wish you can have a cat. I'm like, that's so random, but yeah, no. No, it was so funny. He was like, I was like, I'm sorry, I'm allergic. And he was like, oh, it's your mom's fault. Like, he's messing around, of course. And he's like, oh, it's your mom's fault. And I was like, what do you mean it's my mom's fault? It's not her fault. It's like, okay, then is your dad allergic? I'm like, no. He's like, okay, then it's your mom's fault. I was like, but anyway, he's messing around. He loves my mom. but I think I'm like, it's Mother Nature or the environment or whatever. But yeah, no, he loves cats too. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't want to be taking allergy meds every single day. And because when I'm around cats, like I scratch my eyes out and my face gets puffy. It
Yep.
stinks.
My
Yeah.
sister's the same way. Yep.
Yeah, but thankfully, if you couldn't have a cat, would you get a dog?
I probably would have a dog. I mean, growing up, I always thought I'd get a dog, not a cat, because we had a next door neighbor had a boxer that I just loved playing with growing up. And so I always thought I was going to get a dog. But then when I moved out on my own, obviously taking care of a cat is far less work than taking care of a dog.
Right. Yeah, that's what I heard. That's true. So let's talk about your memoir. The This Is Not Who We Are, which Confessions of an Election Official, which I like that name. So why did you name it This Is Not Who We Are?
So, two reasons. The first being during the pandemic with the increased attacks against Asian Americans, because we were
Yeah, I
being
remember.
blamed. I would watch TV and all these pundits would say, "This is not who we are. We're better than this."
Hmm.
But to me, it was who we are. At our core, we're not always good people. And so my memoir, I write about some of the things I'm not exactly proud about my life, including depression, and getting back to the stigma against mental health issues. But it includes things, moments of weakness in my life where I wasn't the best person I could be. And that's kind of why I named it This Is Not Who We Are. The other reason is I thought it'd be really cheeky to name a memoir This Is Not Who We Are, because a memoir is supposed to be about who you are. And so it was kind of an inside joke that it was never meant to be the actual title of the book. It was kind of like the title I would have before I came up with the real title. But then it seemed like a good name for what I actually wrote about.
So can you give an example of something that you're not proud of? For the depression part, I thought in my head, it's like there's no reason to feel shame. So how come you felt like that for depression? It's because of stigma?
Yes, definitely. When I think about it deeply, I'm not ashamed of the fact that I've suffered from depression almost my entire life. But it is the stigma against mental health. We're supposed to be better people, be able to rise above things like depression. And so there's shame there, but it's shame that I know shouldn't be there.
Yeah, yeah, I have those feelings too, where it's like, there's no reason there should be shame to feel shame, but your brain is basically because it's conditioned by society. So it's all about like rewiring and unlearning that type of negative, toxic conditioning, which is what we're doing right now. You're writing your book, I have this podcast, and the goal is to have more people having this conversation. I feel like since 2020, the pandemic, a lot more people are starting to be a little bit more understanding because of anxiety. Because when everybody's in and no one can go out, everyone's thoughts are getting louder in their head because majority of people, they go out and they work themselves to death, and they go and party and drink, and from there they think they don't have mental health issues because they don't hear those voices. But once all of that is taken from you and you're home alone, or you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, your body's going into shock, and then all those thoughts, like the trauma that you went through as a child, it's all like coming to you. And so I think some people, there's still a lot of work to do, like don't get me wrong, but I feel like a lot more people are like bring up mental health, they're like more understanding, but they just think more surface level at the moment, like depression, anxiety. Where like my goal with this whole brand is not just to talk about depression, anxiety, even though obviously that's very important, but I want to talk like more deeper of why we develop depression. Like, it's also there's different like types of depression. There's clinical, and then there's like episodes, like if depending on how your life is at the time, I forgot what that's called, episodic or something like that. And so just going more deeper into that, because it's not simple, as we were talking about in the beginning of this episode. And so in your book, what can you tell me, just like a little bit of something of outside of the depression, what was something that you did that you were not happy with? I mean, we're all human. We all do things, like we're not perfect. So can you give me an example of what people can like read in your book?
Well, one of the things I wrote, one of the sections in my book that I have a intimate relationship with a young woman,
Hmm.
which has given me pause because she is much younger than me. And
Hmm.
am I taking advantage of somebody because she's not as mature as me? Although I would argue she's much more mature than me. But it is, it was the most, it was the reason I started writing the book. When I decided to write a memoir, she and I were going to write a shared memoir. We were going to tell our story because it's been a very rewarding relationship because we've created a space where we can talk about anything with each other without judgment. So I can tell her anything and know that she's not going to look at me askew, that she's going to accept me for who I am. So
Mhm.
we were going to write a shared memoir, but then it was way too complicated to do that. So I decided I was going to write a memoir beyond our relationship, and that's what I ended up doing. But that section of the book, I don't, I'm not ashamed of it, but it's something that I've really questioned. Have I somehow taken advantage of this person that's much younger than me?
Mhm.
And it was a very difficult thing to share with people, and it's something I'm proud I put it in the book because, again, it shows a part of myself, my sexual self, to be
Mhm.
frank, where I don't think most people are comfortable sharing that with the world.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a part of who I am, and it's a very important part of who I am.
Yeah, no, I get that. And the fact that you had these thoughts go through your head, it's that you felt that you questioned yourself in that way. It just kind of shows that you didn't take advantage. I mean, I don't know too much about it, of course. I've been on the other side of that, except that it was more illegal for the guy, if you know what I mean. I was also like I was young. I was a teenager, and he was like 21, which is, but that was like my time in high school where I guess I just thought I was cool that I guess a 21-year-old, I was 15 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, he never came to me be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry I took advantage," or there was never anything like that. It was kind of like it was, we never had a conversation about that. It kind of was just like, oh, like it never, not that like it never happened. It's just, I guess he didn't see anything wrong with it. But, and at the time I didn't too, but I was also a teenage girl. I didn't think like that. But then I kind of think back at it because there was like sexual components involved, like not sex, so it wasn't like, I guess technically he didn't break any laws. I don't know. I guess not. I don't know.
Yeah.
But now looking back at it, because I was also like intoxicated too, so that adds to it as well. But and also I think he was also just got out of jail.
Wow. Wow.
But it wasn't for that. I think he just got caught selling weed or something like that. I
Okay.
don't think it was. Then again, I don't know. And that's actually a story that is, I don't really talk about much, and I've had these moments of feeling not the best of myself because I'm like, I was like I think I was 14, about to be 15. I think it was like a month before I was gonna be 15, and then I think back and I was like, oh my god, he was 21 years old, and like he also just, I think, yeah, he just wasn't be somebody that I would associate with now, if you know what I mean, like just that lifestyle of just him. I mean, I don't know what he's doing now with his life, but at the time, just if I was like 22, let's say, I wouldn't associate myself with that kind of person. At least I don't think so.
Yeah.
So in my head, I was just like, why did I do that? And then also, it just, I think I was 14, there was a 19-year-old one once. And I think back and I'm like, technically, I wonder if they thought in their head, do you think they took advantage of me? I don't know.
Yep.
But
It's hard to know what people think.
yeah, yeah. But the fact that you had these thoughts. So if you don't mind me asking, like, are you guys still like together, or is that like not happening anymore?
We see each other on occasion. I don't see her a lot. She has a 7-year-old son
Oh, okay.
who takes up a lot of her time. Obviously, she cares a lot about her son. So we see each other maybe once or twice every few months, and we text each other and we're connected on social media.
Yeah. Well, that's good that you guys are still in touch and such. Wait, when did you write the memoir? How long ago?
I finished writing in 2023.
How long did it take?
12 years.
Oh, wow.
It was a very complicated process.
That is so, I always sometimes think about writing a book, but I never do it. I just want to know what to write about. I feel like with just even just me talking to so many people on this podcast, I've talked to like over 100 people by now. Just all like the stories and such. Or I mean, I have my own personal story too. And I've done some writing on medium.com if you know what that website is. And I've done some like free writing on there. Like just stuff going through my brain as someone who has bipolar. And I've done it on there because like no one knew me. And it's hard for people to be open about dark things like that because like people you get that fear that people are going to judge and criticize you. When did you get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm just gonna write a book and have everybody know of what I did? Like, how did you get that courage?
So, writing a book has been a lifelong goal of mine. I wanted to write a book in junior high. And so it's been
Hmm.
something that's been a goal of mine my entire life. When I started writing the memoir, I didn't know exactly what I was going to write about. And then I'm a big fan of Bob Dylan. And
Hmm.
Bob Dylan wrote a memoir, and it was, I think, 5 chapters. And each chapter is of different parts of his life. So it wasn't like one long story. And I thought, that's what I want to do. And so mine is basically 6 chapters about different parts of my life. And once I found that structure, that's when I was able to really get the book done, I guess. It was to take the step in saying, I'm going to share this with the world and let people know the deepest parts of me. It was, I won't say courageous, but it was one of the most difficult things I ever had to do because, to your point, if they didn't like the book, does that mean they didn't like me?
True. I didn't even think of that.
But once I made the decision I was going to publish it, it was like, yes, that's exactly the right thing to do, because it chronicles large portions of my life, and to get that out into the world actually feels good.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, for somebody who is struggling to be their most authentic self online, at family events, just overall, like what advice would you give them?
I think the advice I would give them, and goes back to me being an Asian American. I think a lot of racism is based on the fact that we tend to lump groups of people together without considering them individuals. And
Hmm.
getting back to the way we treat depression, we're not treating the individual, we're treating everybody the same way. I think by telling your authentic story, it really improves the world in general because it is for people, if we look at people as individuals, I think we treat people better.
Hmm.
It's harder to be, like we were talking about earlier, angry at someone that you know personally because you know their story, you know what they're going through. So to be at our authentic selves, I think, is one of the most important things people can learn to do, and it makes the world a better place to live. It sounds floofy, but I really think it's true that if I see you as the person you are, I'm much more likely to treat you with kindness.
Yeah, and I think just also just spreading that message. I No one's born angry. So when people when I see comments online that are just so cruel, I respond and I say, "Are you okay?"
I like that. I like that a lot.
It's true. I mean, they're not directly like towards me. I mean, I've had my fair share of hate comments, but like I even had one person told me to throw myself off a bridge, but
Wow.
I have a rock around my ankle too. So
Well,
you gotta laugh at it, you know?
one of the things that I was worried about when I was writing the book was that it's such a personal story that people wouldn't be able to relate to it. And so
Mm.
it was really helpful. And my editor, that was one of her first comments, was, this is such a relatable story. People are really going to like relate to what you're sharing, especially the mental health aspect that so many people are struggling these days, that people are really going to relate to your story. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, you should. Absolutely. And get as many podcasts as you can and spread that message because you're doing an amazing thing, David. And I really do appreciate you. And I just want to say thank you for taking the time this morning to come on here to tell your story. I think we had a really good conversation. And also just telling me like all about the election officials and clearing everything up for me that I was like curious about. So when I saw that you're gonna be on my podcast, I was like, opportunity. Because I don't, because I don't know anybody that was in your position. So I'm like, thank you, universe. I need to pick his brain. So I just want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Absolutely have enjoyed this conversation, Justine.
I'm so happy to hear that. Also, just to let people know, you can find his memoir on Amazon, but of course, I'll leave all the links in the description as well.
Thank you.